On the 23rd of November 2023, to mark Doctor Who's 60th anniversary, fans were greeted with a special colorisation of the Daleks. The first ever appearance of the titular monsters and the story that ensured Doctor Who's success for years to come, saving it from the brink of cancellation. Fans, like me, have been dreaming of colorisations of black and white stories for years, so when the announcement of this finally came, I was over the moon. I counted down the minutes until it aired, and then I actually saw it. It's safe to say that the Daleks in Colour has divided opinion, with fans either loving it or hating it, and I'm still not sure where my opinion lies. My biggest takeaway has been the question as to whether this was actually a good idea. In the latest issue of Doctor Who magazine, showrunner Russell T Davies said that the colorisations came about as a result of children not wanting to watch black and white TV. He said that he intends to colorise all of 60s Who to make it accessible to modern audiences. This is certainly a sentiment I can understand because even though today I adore black and white Doctor Who and the likes of the Universal Monsters and other black and white movies, as a kid I hated it. I used to watch the colorisations of Laurel and Hardy rather than the real thing because I found it so off-putting. Russell's claim that kids won't watch black and white is certainly valid, but was that truly the reason for this new colorisation? Or was this simply a way to turn classic Who into new Who? Okay, let's begin with the elephant in the room, the colorisation itself. The team who worked on this did an absolutely incredible job. There are moments when you watch it that you almost forget it had ever been black and white. At times it does feel very oversaturated and there's no way Barbara's top was actually that pink, but if you think of it in terms of 1960s kitsch, then it makes for a very enjoyable aesthetic. I'm glad they kept the TARDIS console white and the Daleks silver, and I can support all other creative liberties. Perhaps I'd have preferred the Skaro City to appear more in line with its appearance in The Witcher's Familiar, rather than the purple adopted here, but if the whole thing had been shades of grey, then what would have been the point of colorising it? This gave the story a tone more recognisable from Doctor Who and the Daleks, and worked really, really well. Plus, the Next Time trailer at the end of the episode shows signs of more great things to come, with the Daleks' invasion of Earth and the Celestial Toymaker looking like real highlights. I do look forward to what is colorised next. My opinion on the actual colorisation is very positive, but the thing that complicated my experience was the new edit. Originally 175 minutes, the Daleks in Colour has instead been edited down to 75 minutes. That's 100 minutes missing. There are whole movies shorter than that. And this brings us back to that question of whether this has been designed for the attention span of children or modern audiences accustomed to New Who. The pacing of Classic Who compared to New Who is vastly different. The Daleks was originally a 7-part story which has lots of breathing room and relies on building an eerie atmosphere to tell the plot. Yes, this does mean that the entirety of one of these parts is dedicated to jumping over a hole in a cave, something I was very glad to see edited out, but it allows the story to grow. New Who, on the other hand, usually consists of a single story being told within 45 minutes. Occasionally this is stretched to an hour or maybe even a 2-parter, but generally stories are much quicker to fit in this 45-minute runtime. New Who's doctors have been very energetic as a result, to run between locations in a hurry, work things out quickly, and defeat the villains swiftly. But this is simply not how Classic Who works. The new runtime for the Daleks tried to give the appearance that this was Doctor Who behaving in the same way as it does today, but it just did not work for me. Hartnell's Doctor is one who works things out slowly. For much of his stories, he slowly wanders around pondering to himself and working out what to do. Ian is therefore the man of action in the meantime to do the physical stuff while the Doctor thinks it through. This new edit tried to force all the characters into action roles and make it appear as if Hartnell was equally as energetic as David Tennant or other modern Doctors. In just 20 minutes, Susan had managed to explore the jungle, explore the city, be captured by the Daleks, escape the Daleks, meet the Thals, and be recaptured by the Daleks. This takes her 3 parts to do in the original. That's insane. The Daleks in Colour speeds by at a breakneck pace. I've seen this story a million times, yet I still couldn't keep up with what was happening because there was just so much going on at once. Take this scene as an example, where the Doctor escapes the Daleks and within seconds makes it back to the Thal camp. There was never any downtime, never a moment to breathe, every scene was an action scene. It felt like a YouTube best-of compilation, taking all the best bits of the episode and editing out all the stuff in between. Every scene was filled with dialogue and it was simply too much information to take on. The irony is that the first time I watched the Daleks I found it immensely slow and boring. It wasn't until I watched Peter Cushing's Doctor Who and the Daleks that I found an appreciation for the story, having seen an abridged version. Having the original story re-edited into a style to be more like the Peter Cushing film should, on paper, have been the perfect thing for me. But watching this, I'd have rather taken the time with the 7-part original and watched the characters grow and develop. Something they can't do when all their scenes are edited out unless they're running in them. Classic Who relies on the atmosphere it builds to be so effective. The reason the Daleks scared audiences so much back when they first appeared was because of the suspense beforehand. Originally, the Daleks aren't first glimpsed until the very end of part 1 of this story, but in colour, they appear in the first 10 minutes. Of course, this is edited for an audience already expecting to see the familiar Daleks, so maybe the editors just wanted to rip the band-aid off and show what we've come to see. But that just doesn't work with this story. The Daleks needs its build-up, needs the wait, so that the monsters appear so scary. Seeing Skaro so desolate and empty is what makes seeing beings confined to tanks occupying it so shocking. When you cut out all of the scenes of Skaro being desolate and post-nuclear, it takes away the entire impact of seeing a species who were able to survive. I say all this as someone who does struggle with long classic stories. Anything over 4 parts is a slog for me. I really enjoy omnibus versions of these stories, like we saw in Tales of the TARDIS, as consuming the entire story in one uninterrupted stretch makes for a really enjoyable experience for me. However, an omnibus keeps the original content intact and doesn't cut out all the scenes where no one is talking. The Daleks was a fitting story to choose as the first ever colorisation, but if they needed to edit so much out to fit a certain runtime, I think they should have chosen a shorter story instead. The other major change here is the new score by Mark Ayres, and never have I heard such a blatant impersonation of Murray Gold. Now, I adore Murray Gold's music, but it is very deliberately designed for the tone and vibe of New Who. Again, trying to force this modern Doctor Who sensibility onto Classic Who simply doesn't work. Even if you added the goofiest, silliest music to the most emotional and heartbreaking scene you know, it would not change the scene into a comedy, as the context and content remains intact. I remember in the early episodes of Doctor Who Confidential, when asked about their memories of Doctor Who, many of the cast and crew involved mentioned the music having creeped them out as a child. As well as the slow suspense, the spooky and ambient music is what made stories so unsettling. Take this scene as an example, when the Doctor, Susan and Ian first meet the Daleks.
You will move ahead of us and follow my directions. This way. Immediately.
The music is so weird and unnerving, mixed so deep into the background that you can barely notice it, that the scene becomes so much more threatening. You never know when the Daleks will speak next. The tension builds so much that you're truly on the edge of your seat. Now compare it to the Daleks in colour.
You will move ahead of us and follow my directions. This way. Immediately.
The music is far too dramatic and seems to score a different scene entirely. What we hear doesn't match what we see at all. All sense of dread and mystery is gone, instead replaced with action and bombast. The energetic score is clearly designed for the snappy re-edit, but seems to only fit the pace of the edit as opposed to the pace of the story itself. Its obnoxious volume majorly distracted from several scenes and left others feeling just weird. The TARDIS team's cunning escape is a scene that should be filled with tension and excitement, but the new music plays it entirely for laughs.
No! I'm not going! No! Help me to get them inside.
Of course, if you're chopping away at so many scenes, the music will be equally as chopped, so a new score was required. I'm just unsure why it was made so deliberately different. If Russell was truly making this an accessible introduction to Classic Who for newer and younger fans, then surely you'd try and stick more faithfully to the original. Because if a viewer likes this and decides to carry on with Doctor Who, they're gonna get a surprise as to why the very next story and onwards are so slow in comparison. Overall, the Daleks in Colour was a very disappointing endeavour for me, which left me with feelings of whiplash. All that made the original story so effective is either edited out or drowned out with an annoying new soundtrack. The new Whoification of Classic Who should never be attempted, as they are such vastly different shows. Trying to make past stories appear as energetic and exciting as modern stories will never work, as Classic Who's format doesn't allow it to. Classic Who, and especially the Hartnell era, is built on fleshing things out and letting our characters experience their surroundings. This is why pure historical stories work so well in this era, because stories allow the time to simply sit in their core themes and watch plots naturally grow and develop. Heck, my favourite First Doctor story is Farewell Great Macedon, a pure historical story that couldn't be any slower if it tried. Though the colorisation itself is very well done, the Daleks in Colour loses everything that made the original story so effective by shifting its focus from tension, suspense and dread to excitement, action and energy. Off the back of Tales of the TARDIS, which treated Classic Who with a great respect and sought to give some of its characters some true development, this seemed to do the very opposite, chopping and changing the show's legacy to instead give it the feel of the show's modern incarnation. Maybe the Daleks was just too long of a story to use as the very first colorisation. It would be an absolute pain to colorise the entire thing, and nobody wants to see the cave episode if they don't have to. But rather than shaving 100 minutes off this story, maybe only 30 or 40 was necessary. The story should have more downtime, more space to breathe, and the music wouldn't need to be so fast to keep up. There are definitely better ways to introduce young fans to 60s Doctor Who than trying to pretend it is anything remotely like the show as we know it today.